Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the 11th episode of the PixelPlay podcast, the weekly podcast where true grown-ass men get together to chat about everything they love about video games, everything they hate, and all the news going on in the industry. I am one of your hosts, Kaylan, aka Ktastrophy, joined as always by my co-host, Adam, CSRadical. Adam, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing a little bit okay. We got a long weekend coming up, so us Canadians are all like, yeah. And then I just realized as soon as I said that, I'm like, wait, Easter's not just never mind. This already went horribly. Skip whole podcast thing. You know what? I'm done as a co-host. I think should see myself out. Sorry guys, I'm out.
It's a conversational podcast, so if you leave, you're kind of integral to the show.
I talk to myself a lot. How dare you, sir?
I'm not saying it's not a problem. I'm just saying it's not going to be great dialogue if you just talk to yourself.
Well, if you just play a second character, right? It might work.
Hello, it's me, the second character. I'll tell you what I think.
Apparently, your second character came from a time machine back from the Renaissance. So I don't know.
1930s speakeasy, Kaylan. It's my second. It's apparently my second persona.
Yeah. See. Yeah.
Yeah. See.
So this is the Mafia Play podcast.
Yeah. Ain't gonna tell them nothing. Skinny Jeans got the loop on me. I'm gonna get him.
Damn.
Ain't nobody got to talk bad.
How dangerous is the Pixel Mafia? Ooh.
Oh, it's bad. It's bad.
But you know what? Sometimes, depending on how they come in, if they come in with a drive-by with a Tommy gun, it's so much going on that it goes frame by frame and it lags so hard you might have enough time to dodge the bullets like you're Neo. So it might work out.
Well, that's the thing. The bullets travel like tick 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 tick. You can just jump over them.
It's like
Contra.
Yeah, it's like playing a Centipede.
Exactly. Adam, we've quickly derailed from this podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a video game podcast. This week, we're going to be talking about the rumors and then reveal of Call of Duty. My God, what Call of Duty is it now? The newest Call of Duty.
The new one, yeah.
The new one, supposedly Call of Duty Vanguard, and what that campaign might look like. And we're also going to be talking about the future and survivability of Cyberpunk 2077, because that's what we do every week. And we're going to be talking about Crash Bandicoot coming to PC and that whole fiasco. And I believe, Adam, you have a Untitled review for us again?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So with that, let's buckle in and get ready. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a shout out. We had a lot of new listeners and a lot of new subscribers last week. So if you are one of those people, thank you for sticking around, joining. Hope you guys are enjoying the show. We really appreciate you guys.
And we're sorry.
For what?
Everything.
No. They know what they're getting into when they get here.
Especially the thing. Here. You know the thing. You know exactly the thing.
Adam, we don't talk about that thing.
Oh, sorry, my mistake. I forgot the DMs from earlier.
All right, well, let's get right into it, ladies and gentlemen. Topic 1, Call of Duty Vanguard. So, Adam, this comes from Ali Jones at Games Radar. The next Call of Duty is reportedly set in an alternate history, 1950s, where World War II never happened. They write, following its reveal of its claim of what is claimed to be working title for this year's game, Vanguard, leaker Modern Warzone has released a new report outlining the game's setting. In a recent video, Modern Warzone stated that, quote, the entire game takes place in an alternate timeline where 1945 wasn't the end of World War II and will take place in the 1950s. Adam, first of all, let's start. Where are you in a Call of Duty sort of fan base?
I haven't played one since, I want to say, World War II.
Like the original World War II?
No, like the newest one that was Call of Duty World War II.
Okay.
I played basically like your Modern Warfare all the way up to 3 without any hesitation, Black Ops all the way to 2 without any hesitation. I was pretty big into it on the 360 era. And then, like a lot of things, you play the same thing 10 times in a row. Eventually, you start to get bored of it. So I've been kind of off it for a while. Also, I felt like they were starting to get too much into the, what's the best way I can explain it? Like, you have to chug a shit ton of monster to really, like, keep up with those games because it's just way too fast-paced. I found that, like, when I started getting out, the spawn rating in those games was getting so ridiculous that, because I know why. They wanted you to always be in the action, whereas my brain goes, I'm more of a tactical player, so I'd rather have at least a few seconds to get my whereabouts and kind of assess everything before I jump into the action. But then again, it's hard to jump into the action when 5 seconds from the second you get going again, there could be somebody behind you without you having any idea. So I kind of noped out of that after a while, but story modes I always kind of kept up with when I could. Even when the multiplayer wasn't great, I'd still play the story campaigns because I thought they're like, here's the thing. A lot of people love to shit on Call of Duty for being copy and paste, but you better not change the core gameplay because that is probably some of the smoothest, best first-person shooter gameplay you're going to get. So when they mix it with a maybe lackluster but kind of average story, it's still a pretty good campaign because the shooting is that interesting and that much fun to play. So I'm not like out of Call of Duty, which what makes this story so interesting, but I'm also like in the, okay, even if this was like a really cool concept, I'm going to need like half off before I start looking at it, which for Call of Duty games is pretty rare.
Yeah, so you skirt both the line between multiplayer and single player then, right?
In my heydays, I was playing a lot of multiplayer still, and then I'm pretty much almost anti-competitive gaming right now because it's not fun. It's not what I think I'm too old for this shit. I can't believe I'm 33 using that line already, but I think I'm too old for it.
We're old now. We don't play that online game.
I'm not interested in being angry. I'm already angry enough at real life. I don't need video games to also just keep perpetuating that hate.
Grandpa needs his quiet time and his stories. He doesn't need kids yelling at him. I have one at home that does that for me. I don't need to pay
you're forgetting the anime butts. That's the other part that I have to intake too. You know, I got to have a little bit of dessert on top. You know.
Yeah, I'm the same way. In a way, I really enjoy Call of Duty multiplayer, or the opposite. I like the single player campaigns. I've never super been into the online multiplayer. I was just never really good at it. But I've always really enjoyed the campaigns, especially like historical ones. You probably don't know this about me, but I actually went to school for history, particularly like military history. So for me, it was always, if there was a historical tone to it, I was right into it. So whether it was Battlefield 1, Call of Duty, even the old Medal of Honor games, like those were my jam.
Yeah, you had like that Brothers in Arms.
Brothers in Arms. Yeah, that one is probably the best one.
What was the Valve one? I think it was Day of Defeat.
Yeah, I never played that one, but I played like some like really bad ones because like at one point everything was a World War II military shooter, and
it's almost like the games industry just slaps the spam button on anything that works for like 5 years.
Who would have thought?
I know.
So that actually brings me back to a question I have later. But what do you think of this campaign of going to World War II / alternate history World War II?
Well, assuming it's true, I'm so down for that because it'd be certainly more refreshing than the same pretty cookie cutter military, either historical or fake present fiction kind of stories that we get now. Because, you know, sure, you could just have another story where it's, hey, look at how we won the war. Or you could have another story of like, hey, look how we beat the terrorists. This time it's like, hey, what if we weren't winning properly? Like, I don't know if they mean, like, the Nazis win in this, or if it's just the war's still going. Is that clarified in the article? Because I can't remember.
The impression I got, it says the entire game takes place in an alternate timeline where 1945 wasn't the end of World War II.
So it sounds maybe more like it's still ongoing.
Yeah. So I think this is an awesome idea. I think
either option is amazing because you can either do what some games have tried to do and not do it very effectively, which is where you get like your Turning Point. Was it Turning Point something of Liberty? Like it was like a system starter for like 360, I think.
Yeah, I remember.
And it wasn't very good. You could get like you're not going to get into Wolfenstein territory, I don't think, because it's the 50s.
Sure you could. Why not?
Well, you could, but I think for Call of Duty, it'd be wiser to kind of just stick to what. You know, that's not true. They do Black Ops and they have the crazy mech shit, so who knows? But if I really had the choice, I want them to do like 50s, like years after like we lost, because that's where you get into things like I don't know if you've ever heard of the show Man in the High Castle that's on Prime, like that kind of stuff. Where I'm going, dude, that's cool because you're taking. It's still the same like gritty, serious. Like shooter that you could have, but now you have the layer of okay, but now you're fighting up rather than most Call of Duty games where you're already the hero and you're just overcoming the villain. This time you've lost, now you have to be the one that get up there. Because more often than not, you're just defending, you know, freedom, whereas you've lost it, now you have to reclaim it. Some games have tried to do it, and most do it ineffectively. I mean, Homefront comes to mind with that. So It's just
Yeah,
it's a great concept. It's one of those things that like I feel that few companies can do, but with something with the pedigree of Call of Duty, I think they'd have like the best chance of anyone to do so.
yeah, I think because I've been thinking about this, like putting my history degree to use. Um, I was thinking like, what would this game look like? And I think you could go down the route like Wolfenstein and do, what if we lost, blah 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 blah. And I think that would be great. But I feel like that's already been done a little bit too. Like it's a little played out of like, what if the Nazis won? What I would like to see is I'd like to just see a world that's been ravaged by, you know, 10, 15 years of war and kind of see what a 1950s style war would look like. So maybe have smaller nuclear weapons. So like having like not necessarily like super campy, but almost like fat like a Fat Man from Fallout 3 where you got like little mini nuke launchers that you can like shoot or do that kind of crazy stuff. Like think almost like a I mean, it's going to go kind of outside the realm, but like almost like a Command and Conquer Red Alert sort of system where you've got like next technology. So you can have like rockets, like they were working on rocket technology just towards the end of the war and like massive mechanized machines and stuff. Like I think it's really cool. And so I was thinking like, how would you do this story? Because for as crazy and silly as Call of Duty can get, I've always found that when it comes to their historical and I'm not counting Black Ops because Black Ops was like a little bonkers. But in terms of like their World War II stuff, they were always pretty accurate, or at least like tried to be respectful of that time period. And so I don't think we're gonna have a super crazy thing where it's like zombies and the occult and Mecha Hitler and all that kind of stuff.
As
But
much as we love it, but probably not.
I think for this one, I think you go down the serious route. You make it like a serious, gritty sort of situation. And so I was like, okay, well, how would this look? And so I'm thinking
That would
like,
have been my question: is what do you do with a story, or what do you even do with a setting where it's just the same as World War II, but maybe a few years removed? Because
so
my question with them would at that point would be like, what's the point of it just being like World War II in 1950? Like, is it really going to look that much different?
I think it would, and I think it would be sort of because if you think about it, like after the 1950s, it becomes very much more U.S. military might versus like you get Cold War battles. So you got stuff like the Korean War and Vietnam, where it's a massive military power against a rebel-backed
Well, I'm just
whatever. It's
thinking
not.
like how many more times are you just going to have like fights in no man's land and the beaches of Normandy kind of stuff? Like, would you have to suddenly change the setting to be something different? It's like, hey, like the war has actually moved on to Africa or somehow Australia. Like, would you have to like go elsewhere to kind of make it just seem like it's a little bit different? Because if it's just it's the war in Germany or in France or in Russia, but it's 1952 now. Like it doesn't feel like atmospherically it wouldn't seem like it's any different from any World War II game that we've experienced. So it would have to be something more akin to like the weaponry and like hearing different points of view of like how the like it would really be the story selling it, which means the multiplayer is kind of inconsequential almost aside from like a few different weapons.
Well, I think you get stuff like I know like this was like just at the peak of like rockets. Like they were just starting working on rocket technology and nuclear weapons were just becoming a thing. So I mean, how I would envision like what would it take for the war to continue? And so if you like the turning points that I think would happen is like this is how I'd make the story is you know go back to 1941. Japan attacks Pearl Harbor. It does far more damage than it initially did in World War like in the actual World War II. So like a lot more damage. The Japanese end up winning the Battle of Midway. They get control of the Pacific Islands, so the U.S. really can't get out and wage war on Japan in the Pacific. And so they now have more time and energy to focus on Russia and China and, you know, the Asians, like the eastern or western side of Asia. That then puts Russia that they now have to worry about Japan um, and Germany. And so they end up, conceding to Germany, or they at least like get past the Urals, and then Germany takes over eastern Russia. They're now not able to push into Germany. So now you've got the US and the UK and the Allies, fighting on the western front of Europe. Now here's where it gets interesting is if that's the case and Germany doesn't have to fight a two-sided war, are they now more focused that, D-Day never succeeds? Do we have a situation where D-Day doesn't happen and the Allies never get a foothold um, of Western Europe? And so now you have a thing where maybe you're playing as the Allies on a defense against a German invasion of the UK, right? So you're playing in the UK and it's getting invaded, or the UK, gets knocked out. They, secede to Germany. They take over because I think by the 19th. When did? Just a second. Let me do some history checking stuff. Long story short, seconds. I want to see when Winston Churchill got voted out of
Well,
Parliament.
like I said, it's just it becomes a case though of like, okay, you can do a lot with the campaign, but what's the multiplayer then? Because I mean, I'm sure nobody would really care if the multiplayer was just the same as like what you would expect from say World War II Call of Duty, but just maybe with a few different weapons. Because I mean, it's the multiplayer; they don't particularly care. But is there a selling point to it aside from it just being the same old multiplayer? Now, I know that that doesn't mean shit to a lot of people, so it probably wouldn't make a difference. The story's kind of the carrying weight of that concept. It just becomes a game of like, okay, but if you're going to advertise this game like it's a different, like, alternate reality of World War II, is that going to matter to the people that aren't going to care about the campaign? And to be completely honest, as much as I love the campaign, most people that play Call of Duty don't play it.
So I guess in terms of like a gameplay style, what it would be is it would be sort of, um, like I said, kind of a little bit more vertical. So like you get more into like it almost would look more like a battlefield in that sense, because like World War II is a lot of mechanized fighting or like small fighting. So I'd say you have small nuclear like arms. I would say you see like the introduction of helicopters, rockets. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I see. Like the that's kind of where I'm at. Like the Germany was really heavy into the armored sort of stuff like that, and just kind of weird batshit stuff, crazy like that. And so that's where I'm kind of seeing is like you go into like almost 1950s, almost like a Fallout style weapon system, but not stupid
I
or
mean,
not
I
not
know I'm
stupid, but not
overthinking it
silly.
anyway because, like I said, most Call of Duty players they're buying the Call of Duty no matter what's on the label. Activision would have to pick a really, really, really weird concept to get Call of Duty fans to shy away from it.
Yeah.
So I'm probably going a little bit too far. The only exception to the rule so far has ever seemed to be like futuristic combat, when like Infinite Warfare seemed to rub a lot of people the wrong way, which is still one of those things that drives me crazy because my brain was like, oh man, we've had Call of Duty doing the same stuff so long. Now they're gonna do weapons that we've never seen before in Call of Duty. That's something I'm interested in. And people were like, meh. I'm like, well. Then I realized, oh yeah, people don't like change. So
Yeah, like I don't know. I think you're gonna see a lot of the same stuff. Like there'll still be a lot of the weapons, but just like next level ones. But I think what will really stand out is like the nuclear aspect.
now, yeah, I don't
So
know. I
having
don't
like
know how much you can do that in multiplayer because I mean everybody knows the nuke as being the be all end all of the game. So
oh well, because that's we're thinking of like a traditional one. But if you had like these little mini, I don't know. I'm kind of speculating here, but that's where I'm kind of seeing it. But going back to where I see the campaign, I can also see you have a situation where maybe Germany's now invading the U.S., continental U.S., and it's like okay, now we're fighting, pushing it back from there. That's
that'd
kind of
probably be your
an
safest
option.
bet as being like Germany, like the U.S. actually being a battlefront rather than it being in Europe. That'd probably be your
Yeah,
solution.
yeah. So we'll see where it goes. Yeah. Do you think this is? I mean, it's Call of Duty, but how do you think this is
It's
going
a
to
new
receive
if it's a
competitive?
new concept, I'm down for anything because I mean if it's not the same Modern Warfare, Black Ops, or World War II thing, anything that isn't the same three, I'm pretty happy with. The only exception to the rule has always been World War One because I think the further and further back you go, it becomes harder to sell like actually like fast gameplay because the weapons are just not there. So like,
Yeah.
I think it'd be really interesting if they would take like a stab at like say the Vietnam War. Like that's something I would be interested in, but I know that that's a bit of a sore spot for Americana, so they try to shy away from that.
Yeah. They're
They
not
they
big on the
typically
weapons
don't like
themselves.
losing.
No. But I mean, this is once again looking at a very American centric thing. I mean, there's tons of historical conflicts throughout the globe that would be really fascinating to cover. So,
But you know,
is there like
it's always being sold to an American audience first and foremost, so you kind of got to make sure they're involved.
true? Yeah. Um, in terms of like World War II games, like there's been a ton. What are some of the standouts for you? Like, what are some of your favorite ones that
Well, aside from Call of
or
Duty, that's where it gets tough because I mean, you can get to something like say, well, I think that was World War One, but there was a Ubisoft game called Valiant Hearts that was really good at telling the story of the war that way. But I mean, I'm thinking of like shooters and stuff, and like aside from the stuff that we mentioned earlier, like your Brothers in Arms and Day of Defeats, there really isn't a lot that I can remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's other games that like I tried to play. There's a game called Valkyria Chronicles, which is kind of, sort of like a JRPG that takes place during that time, and I couldn't get into that game. But so like for the most part, we're probably just looking into like the first person shooter land for that.
I mean, there's some other ones that stand out. Like Sniper Elite was a really fun one. If you ever played that one, kind of like a slow, methodical stealth game. It's a little bonkers a little bit, but it's
I mean, you
pretty
can
cool.
shoot people's balls off, so it's something.
That is true. I think though, I think for me, it's Brothers in Arms is probably one of the better World War II games, just because it has that sort of squad-based tactics. It was such a fun game, and I kind of wish that one would come back. So, any sort of final thoughts on Call of Duty World War II Vanguard?
Nah, I think I've said my piece. Other than the fact that if you haven't watched Man in the High Castle, you should do that because if you want alternate reality World War II, that's a good show. Also, Shang Tsung's in it, so you can't complain.
It's also a pretty sweet book.
I'm
it's
not
like short. It's like,
I'm dumb, so I don't read.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, I'm a bit of a nerd, so I'm all about the books. But yeah, it's like a short read. It's like 150, 200 pages. It's like a short story. It's really good. So moving from the alternate past, let's look into the future. So Cyberpunk 2077 has recently come out with a new patch 1.2. Probably by the time you're listening, it'll be out or imminently out. So I kind of wanted to talk to you about the patch a little bit. We're not going to go into details because there's a ton of stuff coming out with that.
Yeah, I looked at that list and I'm like,
extensive.
I don't know what any of this means because I played like 30 minutes of it, but I'm sure it fixed stuff that I would have encountered.
Yeah, it's extensive. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. But I will bring up as well. Robert Ramsey at Push Square has a document or an article up about DLC for Cyberpunk. So I'll read it to you, and we can talk a little bit about the state of Cyberpunk, where it's going to go, what its future looks like. Because I know we talk about it quite a bit on the show, and I feel like we've never really had a deep dive into
We
it.
don't
So
talk about it, I just make fun of it.
yeah, I feel like we should probably address it and see where that's going. So let me read this to you, and let's talk about where Cyberpunk 2077 is going to be remembered historically. So Robert Ramsey writes, 9 free pieces of Cyberpunk 2077 DLC have supposedly been leaked via the Epic Game Store. Following the release of the game's latest update, patch 1.2, so it is already up, Reddit user Prickly Assassin managed to sneak a quick look at Cyberpunk's 2077 recently registered add-ons. All we have to go on right now is a set of DLC names, but each one of them suggests some potentially juicy content that could add several much requested features to these releases. The DLC names are Ripper Docks expansion, Body Shops expansion, Fashion Forward expansion, Gangs of Night City, Body of Chrome, and Rides of the Dark Future, The Relic, Neck Deep, and Night City expansion. All the above DLCs are listed as free. Meanwhile, an expansion pass is priced at $14.99. We assume that this will include premium story-based expansions, the same as we got for the Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. So are these free DLCs? Well, it sure looks that for the first 3 are actual expansions that, going by the names, add features to the game. A lot of player criticism has been directed at Cyberpunk's 2077's lack of more in-depth mechanics, and these listings perhaps suggest that better character customization is on its way. As for the rest, we could be looking at additional quests or systems. Night City expansion sounds especially interesting, as are new areas being added to the map. No doubt we'll learn more in the coming weeks and months. Of course, it goes without saying that CD Projekt Red has a lot of work to do when it comes to improving the quality of Cyberpunk 2077 on consoles. So, Adam, what do you think is the future of Cyberpunk, and how do you think it's going to be remembered?
The future of Cyberpunk is going to be determined on its upgrade for consoles. Because, I mean, PC gamers are getting what they're getting because if you have a hardware strong enough to run it, it doesn't really matter. It's really going to come down to what happens by the time that the upgrade is up, and that's supposedly at probably end of this year, so there's still a lot of time between that. I've seen from a lot of people that have at least played the game and finished it that it's fine. I mean, I'll obviously be the judge of when I get the chance to play it, so I'm not going to really take most people's word about it, no matter like how reliable they might be. It really just comes down to the fact is it showed that there is no such thing as a company that you can trust every single time they release something, because they were honestly the last ones left. You know, a lot of people used to say the same thing about Square, then they started making really bad games. Same went for BioWare, and we obviously know what happened with that. And CD Projekt Red was a big one too. I'm sure there's other companies out there that people were like, well, you know, they haven't done anything for a while, but inevitably it always comes down. You're never going to make a perfect game enough times in a row. Something has to go, and greed always outweighs everything else. So eventually, you're going to push something out earlier than you should, just in the conquest of getting more money faster. So, no matter how good the game is at this point, I don't think it matters anymore because the damage has been done. The game will forever be known as one of the ultimate, I guess, disappointments. Lies, like bait and switches, like just games that everybody expected the roof, or not the roof, expected everything out of and got almost nothing from it the first time it launched. Like, especially for PS4 and Xbox One users, like you got a product that just, quite frankly, wouldn't have been good enough for alpha. So it's a case where even if the game, like by the time that this is all said and done, when everything has been patched and it runs smoothly on every device, all the DLC has come out, whether free or not, I hope that most of it's free, especially all the cosmetic stuff, because the cosmetic options when I did play the little bit of the game that I did was very limited for a game that's supposed to be all about doing everything you want. So when all that's said and done, it still won't matter if it's a 10 out of 10 game because it will still be looked at as the game that started as a 4. In the same that No Man's Sky, a lot of people will tell you how amazing it is now, but most people never played it because all they remembered is the trash dumpster fire it was when it launched.
Yeah, I'm somewhat in agreement with you. I think CD Projekt Red, and not to their own doing, was just set up to fail with this. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt was amazing, and it's a great game. I'm not taking that away. But I feel like one of the key things about that game that made it awesome was the writing and the quest system. And from what I understand, the Cyberpunk 2077 does not meet that level. So I don't think it'll ever live up to the hype and to the acclaim that Wild Hunt has. That being said, I think people also gave CD Projekt Red a little bit too much credit. The Wild Hunt, for all its greatness, was still a bit of a clunky game, especially when it first started. When it first got released, it was a bit of a mess. Not in the sense of it being broken, but mechanically there was a lot of weird choices, and those improved every time that game got updated. And it's a huge improvement from what it was now. Like now it's an impressive game, but even still, when you go and play it now, it's still a little clunky and it's not 100% smooth. So I think people give CD Projekt Red a little bit too much credit. Like The Witcher 1 and Witcher 2 were great games, but they never were acclaimed hits. Like they were very niche. And so they had one big game that everyone bought into, and then everyone's like, oh man, CD Projekt Red is the next big AAA game. And I think they kind of got a little bit too big for themselves.
Well, sure, but that's a reality of the industry. Like overhype is something that the industry has been doing for forever. It's just part of the gig. So I'm not gonna give them any sympathy for that at that point because every company handles it once you get to a certain level. They just finally hit the status that a lot of other companies are at, so people expect a lot more out of them now than when they did when Witcher 2 and Witcher 3 were coming out. You know, now that they've shown that they're the high quality, they became what BioWare did, where BioWare was pumping out amazing games left and right, and people expected 9 to 10 out of 10s constantly, and when the first one didn't happen, or actually not even when the first one didn't happen, I still think Mass Effect 3 is a fantastic game, it just has a shit ending. But like as soon as that happened, now people were like, okay guys, put up or shut up, and then Andromeda came, and everybody was like, nope, screw you. You guys don't exist to us anymore. That's the gig. As soon as you become a masterpiece developer, and the same's going to go for all the Sony developers, like if Naughty Dog ever puts out a really bad game at launch, they're going to get the same treatment because it's the same way. Once you start having a pedigree, people expect the pedigree consistently, and the second there isn't one, we know the internet is just the most passionate place, but also they're always known for being so level-headed and reasonable and not overreacting to anything that doesn't go the way that they expect it to. So unless we can change the culture of the community, if you are going to make a series of games that are really good, I know I'm not blasting them for making amazing games like The Witcher 3, but as soon as you do that, now you're playing with the fire of an audience that expects Witcher 3 every single time you pump something out. So I understand what you're saying. I'm also going, that's the gig, so unfortunately that's what they're gonna have to sit in for a while until they can bounce back.
But what I'm saying, like, one of the things I'm saying though is that with like Witcher 3, everyone heralds Witcher 3 as a great game, but no one talks about Witcher 2 or Witcher 1 as being, oh my god, this amazing, great experience. They had one fantastic game in an otherwise, A tier, double A kind of studio, and they made an amazing triple A game. And now everyone's like, well, why is the next game not an amazing triple A game? And yes, they advertised it that way, but at the same time, I think our expectations just got a little carried away because they made one fantastic game and two games that were good, but they weren't classics or hits. Like, no one talks about those other two.
Like I said though, that's the gig. As soon as you make a 10 out of 10, people think you're only capable of making 10 out of 10s again. So everything else is a disappointment. Yeah. As soon as I don't know what the next, like, let's just assume that some next fledgling studio comes out, makes a game of the year, like the Hades guys. Like, as soon as those guys make one really bad game now on PC, like, it's going to get noticed. Although maybe not to them to the same extent because they're still sort of an indie developer. But as soon as you get on the grand stage where people are taking you up there with the likes of, say, your Bethesdas and stuff like that, as soon as you're at that level, and you've only gotten to that level because you were making masterpiece after masterpiece, or even just making one masterpiece that puts you on the map, that's how the fandoms are. As much, I'm not saying it because I'm supporting it, I'm saying it just in a reality check, because I hate it too. I think gaming fandom in general is extremely toxic and extremely dangerous in the way that we put way too much emotional stock into something that, quite honestly, is never going to give back everything that we expect it to every single time we're looking for that dopamine hit. So,
in terms of the future and the legacy of Cyberpunk 2077, I think you're right. I think it has to do with what this PS5 and Xbox launch looks like. Xbox PS5 and Xbox Series
Isn't
X
it complicated?
launch. So unnecessarily complicated. I think that's going to be like, if it comes out and it is running crisp, it's running smooth, the DLC is there, it's basically the game that we promised, I think they're going to be able to salvage their reputation. I think people will kind of realize, like, I think the expectation that this game was going to run as well on a PC as it would on a PS4 base model is a little ridiculous. And even lower, like the Xbox One was not as powerful as the PS4 to begin with. And to have the expectations that it would run seamlessly or without notice between the two. And granted, I know that the concern is that it's unplayable on those systems. But I think if it comes out and it does incredibly well in the next gen systems, people are going to be like, yeah, no, it was meant to be a next gen console game and it should have been. Here's the problem. So
there are a few narratives you can go with it. Like, like you said, like people will just say, oh, well, I guess they shouldn't have made it for PS4. Okay, fine. You can have that narrative. But the narrative then also becomes, okay, but the next game they make is going to be specifically for the next-gen consoles. What happens if that one is in the same state? So the real narrative that's going to come out now is, let's assume they've salvaged it and everything is actually amazing when this is all said and done. Now it becomes, okay, you fooled us once. So the next time you make a game, and especially if it's just for PC and the next-gen, well, I guess it's not next-gen, the current gen now, but like for PS5 and Series X, if you still push that game out early again, now we're definitely talking, okay, it's no longer a game of, oh, you guys just, you made a mistake. No, you're intentionally doing this now. Now you're just being EA. That would be when the narrative really starts to change for what CDPR is. But as it is, I think if the game is fixed in a much better state and all this DLC on top of it, because most people are probably at this point going to wait for all of it to come out to give it another shot. Especially if you got your refund, because now you're just like, well, I'll spend the money again down the road. If it ends up being fine, then I think a lot of people, not everybody, but most gamers will give them, okay, fine, just please don't screw this up for us the next time. They'll be a little more careful, I would hope, but I've been telling people not to pre-order for forever, and we all know that doesn't work. I know because I pre-ordered the game, but I knew going in that I was risking that, and I got lucky to get a refund. But the next time around, like if it happens again, like now we become a case of, okay, so they're just like every other company now, so let's stop treating them like they're on a pedestal. That's the risk CDPR runs is that they're on thin ice. They better not try to crash through it now. That's really where it stands.
Yeah, I was going to kind of agree with you in that sense. Like, no offense, as a community, gamers have a pretty bad memory. I mean, think about how many times everyone complains about, like, oh man, this Assassin's Creed game doesn't work, or this whatever game doesn't work. And
I mean, sports gamers exist. We have all the proof we need.
Exactly. So I think it sucks right now, but with CD Projekt Red, the lengths that it takes, like this game is going to have a long tail, like The Witcher 3 will, and it'll get to the point where it's like, oh yeah, Cyberpunk, I've heard about that game. That's the game that is absolutely terrible to play. And they're going to get it for $20, check it out, and be like, hey, this isn't as bad as people said it was. And so I think CD Projekt Red is going to come out of this looking fine. I don't think Cyberpunk is going to be their flagship game. I think The Witcher 3 will remain that.
It also depends too with the multiplayer that they wanted to add into it as well. Because if you suddenly salvage a really good single player and then add a multiplayer aspect to it as well that people can actually enjoy, then that tells people, okay, no, these guys are still capable of doing it. They maybe should have budgeted it better and maybe like scheduled everything a little bit better. But I mean, you know, at least we know they can still put out a product when they actually put the work in. So it comes down to like okay, so these guys can still do it when they want to. We just got to hope they don't keep putting stuff out to us like a year before it was supposed to be out.
Well, just think of like the controversies that we've had in the past. I mean, it comes to mind like with me, Grand Theft Auto 5. Like, remember that was supposed to have an online functionality that got pushed out so long. It came out. It was
I swear to God, I was the only person in my group of friends that thought that was going to happen. Because I'm like, guys, you understand the scope of what that's going to be. Like, there's no way they'll have that ready in time.
No, but what I'm saying is, if you like, it didn't come out, and when it did come out, everyone was kind of like, like it's boring. There wasn't a lot to do, and now people love Grand Theft Auto 5 online. And
we're talking about I sort of disagree because I was in with a bunch of people that were playing it. We loved it. It just came down to it's like any other games as a service game or any consistently online game. You're not going to have 2,000 hours of content in the first month that you play it. Like, you're going to have to wait for more stuff.
I guess I'm just talking about the fact that people now think of GTA Online as this big success when it started out as...
I would hope so. That had 7 years of work put into it.
But to be fair, so did, Cyberpunk. So like,
well, I mean, like 7 years after it launched to keep working on it, right? Like, sure, Cyberpunk's probably going to look amazing when a few more years of content have been put into it. But that's the same could be said about Avengers, but it still came out like a piece of crap and nobody cared about it. Anthem might have been great 3 years from now, but EA nixed it. It goes both ways. Like, you have to at least make the content that you start with matter. And in Cyberpunk's case, maybe it did matter, but it was so broken that I don't think anybody wanted to see if it mattered.
Yeah. So I guess we can kind of put this Cyberpunk stabs that we've been giving to it, put it to bed. I think we kind of covered that topic.
I'll be back next week with more stuff to say about it.
Awesome. Adam, you brought up you've got an article you wanted to bring to the table. I'm going to pass it off to you now.
It's not like a crazy article. It's just a story that every time these kind of situations come up, I can't help but laugh and point and be like, really developers, you're still not learning this lesson. So Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time. It had a launch for obviously consoles like it was supposed to. It got some console patches for next gen, but it also got a debut on PC. And it was on Activision Blizzard's Battle.net app, and they took a weird route that some companies seem to think is a good idea, which is to make it online only, even if the game has literally no online features to speak of, so it's kind of pointless. We all know why it is because they want money and they know piracy exists. We're not stupid. Here's the problem, though. Neither are pirates. They're pretty smart. So they cracked it in a day, so it didn't matter. Because as we've learned, no matter what you put in, there's always someone smarter than you that's just going to crack the code and completely just bypass it. Sometimes it might be a little bit longer than a day. It might take a week, might take a month, it might take even longer than that, but they'll do it. So the question is, A, why bother? Because we're not talking about like stealing people's data. We're just talking about playing the game for free. And it goes all the way back to the argument too of like how many people that are pirating these games are actually were ever planning on paying for it. And then it just comes down to the thing too of like, why are we preventing active gamers who are paying hard-earned money to play your game and forcing them to have to play it to an internet connection when it doesn't need one? Because it seems like in root of trying to combat like a minority of players that are not going to pay for your game and pirate it, you're actually doing more of a disservice to the many more people that are paying. So it just comes down, like, the article is inconsequential. It's just more another conversation of like, when are developers going to, actually care about their customer base more than, fighting the few $1,000s they're going to lose because of piracy? Because not that many. I imagine if you're going for Crash Bandicoot 4, I don't imagine a lot of people are pirating that game, because I don't think it's an $80 game, if I'm not mistaken. Not to mention, I think at this point, if you're playing Crash 4, you probably already know what you're into. So, like, because a lot of pirates will just do this and download it because they're not really sure about a game. I think by now, Crash is one of those games you know if you're going to play it or not. So, most people that are pirating were never going to buy the game in the first place, or they strictly don't have the money, because we're talking third world countries that do this stuff, where they either don't have access to the game because there's that possibility, or two, they were never going to be able to afford it. So it comes down to the situation where I'm so tired of greedy developers just trying to think that they're saving a few extra bucks, and in the end, all they're doing is just giving another thing that their actual paying customer base is going to be a little more hard done by, because it seems so pointless for a single player, like, basically offline game, because as far as we know, there's going to be no online features ever for it. You're basically just annoying your customers, which, I mean, Activision Blizzard, we all know how great their CEO is, so we know it wouldn't be the first time they've done something to alienate their customer base, but it's just another one of those things where it's like, why?
Yeah. Let me take the role of devil's advocate here. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not saying that they are totally in the right, but just for the sake of interesting dialogue and conversation, I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. And my alternative would be, what else are they gonna do? Like, you're arguing that, yeah, people, like, some people are gonna buy the game anyways, and I agree with you. There are some people who will buy it no matter what. But I think having it that there's a barrier to entry in terms of, if you want this game for free, you've got to go through all these hoops to kind of get the game, download it illegally,
Well, I mean, they
whatever.
don't have to go through the hoops. Like, just the people who figured out how to crack it. After that, no one has to go through any hoops.
No, but I mean, you still have to, like, go in and download it. And I mean, I'd say it's a little bit harder now to download stuff than it was
I
5,
mean,
10 years ago.
I used to do it all the time because I didn't have a lot of money, and it's really not difficult. Most of the time now, like, there are even good ones that you can find that it's an all-in-one installer. You won't even have to do anything. You just let it do the work for you. So in a lot of
Yeah.
cases, there is no hoops. There isn't even, like, some of them you don't even have to copy and paste a file in there to override the exe file. It's literally just click, install, and we'll do all the work. So
Yeah,
in
but
some cases, it's not that at all. It's literally just, I guess, like, they're figuring is that, well, if we create a good enough system, we'll be able to at least go like a certain amount of time making sure that we're going to get our sales in the launch.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to say is, I think, one, there are some people who just will not go down that route. They don't want to, like, they're not huge into PC gaming. They don't know enough. They're just like, yeah, I want to play a couple games. I'm going to buy it off of wherever and just have it easily accessible there versus, downloading it. But from the developer side, I mean, to transfer it and port it over to PC is not free. It does take time. It does take resources. So if you don't put up those barriers and those walls, even if I don't think they imagine that it stops it completely, but if it at least, holds the floodgates for a little while. I mean, gamers generally, they want to be in when things first get launched. I mean, I don't think they care in 2 years from now if people are pirating the game, because most of the sales will happen. But if most sales of games happen within the first week or two of launch, if you can hold back getting it pirated for, a little while, that's going to grow your sales. And I'm not talking about Crash Bandicoot, because Crash Bandicoot, it's a year-old game now. It's on PS5 or PS4. Like, that's not the one I'm talking about. But I'm talking about the next big release that's on PC. you're putting up those DRMs not to stop anyone from ever pirating it, but probably just to capture as many sales as you can in that first, month or so.
Well, then
After
I
that, I
would
think
just
it
make the
breaks it.
argument, like, show me the data that shows how much money you're losing, because most of the time it's not much. It really, like, if they can prove that like 10% of like of what would have been gained, like 10% of like all the game sales is about how much they would have gained extra in because of piracy. Well, I mean, sure, if you have the data there, but more often than not, we find that it generally just becomes a case of almost nobody's pirating, and the ones who do, it's not it's a drop in the bucket. And especially, and this is why I don't have any sympathy for this specific story. When you have Activision Blizzard, who had record profits this year, laid off 200 like almost 200 people, and their CEO is about to get a $200 million bonus. I'm sorry to say that I don't care what data that they even have, because the data that they have is nowhere near as substantial as the data that we have that shows that a CEO just gave himself a $200 million bonus when he's already worth billions of dollars and screwed a bunch of people out of their jobs. So I'm not willing to believe for a second that they're doing this to protect themselves so much as they're willing to protect the very, very minor amount of money that they might not make, so that they can't go to their investors and be like, give me another $300 million in bonus money. Like, I'm sorry. I know, like, believe me, I don't actually disagree with the reasoning that they have, but they're also expecting me to take it from any other point of view other than, fuck you, you rich piece of shit. That's kind of like my honest thing on it, too. It's like, look, you might be right that you're losing money off of piracy. I just don't care, because you haven't earned my sympathy, because you guys clearly don't care about your own coworkers, let alone your customer base, let alone even anybody else beyond that.
Yeah, I get where I'm not.
You're not even making bad points as a devil's advocate. It's just, it comes down to a thing of like, with the company that big, we're not talking an indie game. We're talking a AAA developer who we know are making amazing amounts of money. And honestly, let's be completely honest, way too much money that they would know anything to do with. So it's just, I can't, no matter what reasons you give me, unless you can pull out a thing that says half of all people playing the game are pirates, and I don't even believe that number starts in double digits. I don't even know if that starts in a single digit. It might start in decimals. So Adam, I'm not willing to give them that.
I'm not accepting this commie socialist talk you're having here.
Don't worry, comrade. We'll get you soon.
The games belong to the people. Seize the means of production.
You know what? I need Bernie Sanders to own his own game studio, and then we can talk. Okay. And it'll just be grumpy old man with mittens sitting in a chair simulator.
No, for sure. Once again, I'm just, for the sake of argument, just having something interesting.
Yeah, and then I get to have the fun of going, I don't fucking care about what they might think. So.
Yeah,
it's my favorite part.
It's much more interesting than just listening to someone say, "Yep, I agree." So,
well, anytime you can get me to be a little bit slightly angry, you know what? Keep poking the bear. It's good for me.
Let's get Adam riled up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna figure out all your.
Eventually, like by the time we hit like episode 25 or so, you'll probably have learned a couple extra buttons to start pushing.
I'll just figure I can just pull the levers and just make this show happen.
the puppeteer Kaylan over here.
Yeah. So, yeah. Adam, last thing on the docket. We've got an untimely review. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, we are too broke and not connected enough to get games and play them before they get released.
Damn right, I got this one for free.
Hey. So, what we bring you guys is we bring you untimely reviews. So, as we beat games, we just come to you and give you our opinion. If you've already played the game, follow along, see how well your gaming tastes fit with ours. If you haven't, it's a good way to kind of figure out what game you should maybe play next. Adam, this is a game that you just beat, and I've played before, so I think we could actually have a pretty interesting dialogue about it.
Can we, though? Because I played through almost all of Control Ultimate Edition, and I still don't know what the fuck I played. I know I liked it, but I don't know what the hell I did.
I generally know what's going on, but not...
So for those who don't know, Control is a game made by 505 Games, and here's the best way I can try to explain it. You are a person with superpowers that somehow got superpowers.
Yep.
And you end up in a pseudo FBI but secret FBI building where apparently an alternate dimension exists, so the building is not actually the building you're in. So on the
It's a
outside, the building looks accurate, but the inside is always changing because the dimensions seem to intersect constantly. So it ends up being this really weird, like Inception level, like setting where like stuff is always moving around. Some of the areas are like skewed into a spiral or upside down or whatever else. The core of it though is it's just a third person shooter with like superpower stuff, and it's really really fun. It's very unsettling too. They do a very good job with their sound design, the atmosphere with a lot of the really like heavy use of the color red for its lighting to really make things
Yeah.
look very very dangerous, very evil, very unsettling. The
But
first
also
like
like
hour of the game I
it's
played on stream, I couldn't tell if I was going to be getting ready for like a pseudo horror game or not because every time I'd walk into a room I'd be like, I'm not sure if I'm going to get jump scared or not.
well, the thing I was gonna say is I like the use like the artistic style that they went with this. So like everything else for the most part is very clean and very sterile. Like you said, it's kind of like an FBI building, so it has that very,
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
it's what's the word that it's called? It's like something.
institutionalized.
It's like
Like
1950s like era building.
yeah, but it's a lot of grays, it's a lot of whites. It's very it has a very institutional feel, and then the red kind of gives you that hue like something's going on, something's not right here.
Yeah. And I mean, the beauty of it too is that honestly, it's some of the best combat I've played in a while. Like, I had a blast doing it, even through some of the most frustrating parts, which there were quite a few, including both DLCs, which kept me from finishing it and having to YouTube the endings because the boss of the AWE DLC, which also had a crossover with Alan Wake, which I never played Alan Wake, and I still thought that was a really neat way to transfer between the two. And the Foundation, which quite frankly, I just couldn't stand the enemies because I'm like, hey, you know, it'd be really fun if we gave this guy a bunch of enemies that just constantly charge at you with pickaxes and make it really difficult for you to accomplish
Oh god.
anything.
Yeah, I never played the DLC. I played it when it was originally on PS4.
The
And so
the Alan Wake crossover one is amazing, like
yeah.
actually legitimately good. The problem is the boss battle is a giant pain in the ass, and I just couldn't.
Mm.
I did a couple of tries, and I just realized, you know what? I know that there's a specific thing the game like. It wants me to probably use a specific weapon with these attachments to maximize my output. But my thing is always like, if I have to play a game a certain way in order to progress, I don't like that. If
Yeah.
you're going to give me pseudo freedom with the weapons that I choose or the stats that I run, and I can't do it, or at least I can't do it without being like frame perfect, like speed run level accurate, sorry, you don't have me on that. So that's kind of what kept me out of the final boss. But the entire bit before that, every like little puzzle it made me do, every little like dungeon that it made me crawl through was fantastic. And that's the core of the game for the most part, is that I may not have understood a lot of the story, even though like bits and pieces, I skimmed over so much of the collectible side stuff because it's all gibberish.
Yeah.
So even with all that, the gameplay is amazing. The music and the atmosphere is amazing. The setting is incredible. The just the unsettlingness of it and the way that like it almost comes off like you're playing a Netflix series in game form.
Yeah.
Like even the
Yeah.
intro to the game comes off like you're playing like Stranger Things and getting like an intro sequence. So everything about that is great. It's just a damn shame that they made me really angry a couple of times.
Yeah, so I want to go a little bit deeper into those. Like, let's start with like the combat and the gameplay. I I I for the most part love the gameplay. Like the idea, one of the things you could do is you have like sort of like telekinetic powers, and you can like almost like God of War, just bring things to you.
It has a
Use them as
great
a
balance
shield.
between being really good for shooting and then also having the fun of being able to pull stuff out of the ground and throw it, or levitation, or like all these things. So it's almost like they found a way to make really good third person combat and then mix it with like superheroes, like being able to do like almost like your Spider-Man with guns, and it's both done really well.
Yeah, so I was gonna say, like, I think the superpowers are really good, and really varied. So I really like those. But I felt that the guns themselves, though, like the gameplay, like the gunplay is done well. Like the shooting mechanics are great. Like I think it's really neat that there's no actual bullets, but you just have a cooldown period on the gun, which is really cool. But I felt that the guns, and correct me if I've forgotten it, but they were pretty standard in terms of like you've got your machine gun, your shotgun, your pistol, and your sniper rifle. Am I
I don't
wrong
know
in
if
that?
if they added more, because obviously me never playing the original, I don't know if they added some. There was one that was considered like a what would I call it? Like a sticky mine sort of shooter.
Okay.
There was something like, I'm trying to think of all the ones in my head. There was the single shooter, which you start with. There's the machine gun. There's the shotgun, which I used a lot, and eventually I finished a mission where it basically just made it so it had no spread at all. So it just became a really, really high powered pistol.
Yeah.
It was great for that. There was the Pierce, which was almost like a sniper rifle. It was like a charged sniper. There was the, like I said, the mine one. I feel like there's one more I'm forgetting, and I'm just blanking on what it was.
Yeah, so I felt like there wasn't a lot of variety in the guns, and I kind of got bored with
I
those.
think the reason that they went with that is because they knew the superpowers would be a big part of it too. Because honestly, I spent just as much time throwing rocks at people than I did shooting. So
for sure.
I don't think they needed to go too crazy on weapon archetypes. I mean, it could have been nice if they had, like, I don't know, like a consistent laser or something maybe. But aside from that, I don't think they needed to go too crazy, because you have enough of a variance with the powers as well to kind of offset it.
Well, I guess that's what I was kind of getting at, is that with so many cool and unique powers, I'd almost want to see a little bit more imagination and variant in the guns, right? Like, that's kind of where I'm at.
I think the way that they probably looked at it and said, well, okay, we'll start you off that, you can throw rocks and you use your gun. And then as you progress further, okay, but now you can dash. So now you can move really far around the map quickly, and you still have your gun, you still have that. Then you can levitate. Oh, now we bring verticality to it. So I think what their idea is we'll keep the gameplay as it is, but we'll slowly evolve how much you can do. I don't think the complexity of the weapons was what they were going. I think they wanted it more to be the complexity of movement, because as soon as you started levitating, now you have literally the entire area to move around, and so it became more about dodging than it did about attacking. Because I mean, you're pretty much doing the same amount of damage more often than not. It just becomes a game of it's almost like I won't say bullet hell, because that's obviously not what it is, but in the sense of, like, by the time you get towards the end of the game, especially with the DLC, it becomes a lot more of figuring out your surroundings, being able to figure out, like, how to get around things, being able to avoid attacks, being able to maximize, your output in terms of not taking damage and being able to still kill things at the same time. I think that their concentration was more on, I guess, the defensive aspect more than the offense, because there is a lot that can kill you really fast in that game, as I found out the hard way. Because even with my health raised as much as I could get it, it still doesn't take much with some enemies, because if you're getting hit with grenades, it doesn't matter. You're still dying. You're still a meatbag, no matter how many superpowers you are.
Yeah.
I think they probably could have done, like, maybe something a little bit cool, like just like the one, like, really silly weapon just to kind of offset it. Maybe a DLC would have been nice for that. But I think that because the combat at least gradually evolved to enough of a point that I never felt stale playing it. I felt like everything I did was satisfying enough and also varying enough that I didn't feel like there was a sense of malaise to it.
Fair enough. How was it in terms of performance? Because I know when I played it on the PS4 Pro, it lagged a lot. And
fantastic. Buttery freaking smooth. I mean, it's PS5, right. It better be. I don't know. I can't remember if it ran at 60 frames or not. I will check on that while I have the opportunity. But yeah, no, I didn't notice anything terrible. Like, I didn't see any, like, pop-ins, anything to that extent.
What did you think of the janitor level?
Which one are we talking? Like the maze?
The heavy metal maze,
that song immediately, like, on stream, I'm like, I hope I don't get copyright for this, and then I immediately went and downloaded that song, because I'm like, yeah, that's gonna be in my playlist for a bit.
So good. If you
Take
not going into it, but
control.
That is one of the best.
It sounded like I really honestly felt like I put headphones on and was listening to Master of Puppets all over again.
Oh yeah, it was so good. So Adam, we don't really have a ranking system. How would you rank this?
Like, in terms of what? Are we talking just scoring it?
Make up your own ranking system. I'll go first. I'm going to put it on fruit scale.
Cool.
On a scale of cantaloupe to raspberries, I'm going to put this as a banana.
Okay. Well, I think it's an 8. So.
All right, that's kind of where it falls for me. So, yeah.
Like, in all honesty, The only things I take away from it is really two. Like, I dock off 1 point for just the fact that there's a lot of irritating like the way that a lot of the enemy, like the battles are structured. There were a few battles in the game where I think it's actually legitimately unfair because there's no difficulty. You legitimately have to deal with what they give you, and I feel like the expectation that they levy in that game is sometimes Dark Souls levelly. Because there was one specific boss. There's I think it's Tamashi is his name.
Okay.
There is a second battle with him because he's one of the people that you end up trying to find early on in the game. There's a second boss battle with him, and he's one of those really high-flying guys that can throw, like, 2 sets of spikes at you.
Oh, yeah.
And the problem with that thing is those enemies are really difficult to deal with because they basically dodge anything you throw at them, so you have to use your gun.
Those guys.
So the problem with that is when they introduce the floating guys that explode and also other enemies on top of that. So you're already trying to dodge a guy who you can't interrupt. Like, you can't make him like stop attacking you because throwing stuff doesn't do anything, and shooting him is kind of hard to do when you're trying to shoot 10 other objects flying at you. And then on top of that, if he does manage to hit you with those spikes, it takes a chunk out of you. It's not like 5%, it's like 25 plus. Like, it's a lot. And because some of the enemies don't seem to drop a lot of health pickups, you basically have to not get hit for a considerable amount of that boss battle to have a good chance of beating it. So, like, I would play it, and if I got hit within the first, like, 5 to 15 seconds, I'm like, I'm probably not going to make it through this because I don't think I have enough time. So it's that where it's just like, some of the things were maybe too difficult, and I'm a guy who's pretty good at games, I like to think. So I'm thinking on the outside of somebody who is not as good with these kind of games would be absolutely just dismantled by these.
Yeah.
So that was my one. And then the second is just, quite honestly, I don't think the story did a good enough job of explaining itself towards the end. Like, I was able to sort of tie things together, but because of the kind of show it is, and I'm sure it's an intentional thing, there's a lot that you kind of have to read deeper into to figure out, and that sometimes works, but not everybody is going to read every piece of lore that comes out, especially one that has redacted papers, so all the information that you could really use to help is not there, actually, because it's all blacked out. So you're getting a lot of things that you're like, I know this is important, but I don't know the one thing I need to know to make this important. And then,
and then you have to go back and look at like other documents, and
half of them are literal gibberish. Half of them are just lists or like random email messages. So digging through them is really hard to do. Not to mention, there's these weird cutscenes they have in with the board where it just sounds like almost like you're being spoken to in Morse code. Like, it tells you with the subtitles what they're saying, but it doesn't necessarily do anything to help you. It just sounds like they're saying, help us, but they don't really explain anything. So, like, I've done a little bit of reading into it through, like, Reddit threads and stuff to kind of get a better idea of what the story is. And even then, I'm like, man, if they're still kind of not giving me every piece of information I need to know, that's really a slight against the game more than anything else. Even though I enjoyed a lot of what they offered, I still don't like having too many questions that still haven't been answered for me.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you. Like, I feel like they could have rewarded the player, like, hey, you were reading the documents. Here's a deeper dive. Here, you get a better understanding of the story. You get a better appreciation of it. You're not reading the documents. Here's a basic story about, a girl trying to figure out what's going on, like trying to get out of this spooky house or whatever. Like, I feel like that's what it could have been.
There is a very simplistic way of telling that story. It's just because of the nature of what it is, because it's supernatural, because it involves dimensions and stuff like that. And granted, it's always going to have its trouble. Like, when something like the Ocean View Hotel exists, and only people knowing the game will know what I'm talking about by that, it's really hard to tell a story when you have things like that, and then the astral plane on top of that, and then you have all these weird powers that go into it, and these technologies that aren't really fully explained. So apparently, because somehow somebody gave them the recipe, I guess, they were able to have these things that they wore so they wouldn't be affected by the thing that's possessing people in the game. It's just like, things are just existing and they don't quite help you understand how that's possible. I mean, I love, even if it's bullshit science, I still love bullshit science because it's fun.
Yeah.
When you give me no
Yeah,
science, now I'm mad because now I'm just making now I have to make it up. Don't make me do work.
then you've got the Avengers at that point.
That's true.
No, I'm in agreement. Like having that like science aspect that explains it, that's the stuff that you want in the deep dives. Like, hey, how do we get this? How do we get that? But you should be able to come out with like a clear, here's what the story's about.
If I
you
don't
just
read
play
your
the game.
lore, I should at least like vaguely know what I'm doing. By the end of it,
Yeah.
I'm just like, for example, there's somebody who you discover just before the end of the game and then vanishes. If that makes sense to you, if you know what I'm talking about. And by that point, I actually like it took me reading up on it to know that, oh, that's this person, without me going, I don't know if it's this person or if it's something else that I just totally haven't paid attention to. And like something as big as that specific moment where you finally find this colossal thing and then it all goes to shit, and I don't know for sure if that's the person that I think it is. That's a problem. I should, at least for something that major, know what you're talking about. And I'm sorry for anybody who's never played the game because this sounds so vague, but I really don't want to spoil it. So I'm trying to dance around it as best I can.
Spoil it. It doesn't sound like you know what's going on, so I don't think you can spoil it.
I mean, the GLaDOS thing, I don't...
It was weird that Bowser showed up. Like, I don't get what that's all about. I'm surprised Nintendo even went with it.
I mean, look, sometimes look, Nintendo can't help being involved in games that Sonic the Hedgehog are in, okay?
That's true. Yeah, if Sonic's to be in, then they have to have their representation, right? So.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Adam. Any closing thoughts? Anything we didn't talk about today that you wanted to get off your chest?
I've already bashed Cyberpunk, so I think I'm good, actually.
We've hit our mark. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. If you are one of our newer listeners, thanks for coming back. If you're one of our long times, thank you so much. We really appreciate you. If you just happened to fall here and got lost, end up here, and you stuck around, hey, great. Welcome to the team. We post every Wednesday on YouTube and basically wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Google, wherever, we're there. Our socials are PixelPlaycast. That's both for Twitter and Instagram. And if you have any questions, if you want to email us topics of the show, questions, feedback, whatever, the email is PixelPlaycast, PixelPlayPodcast@gmail.com. Thank you so much for joining us, and all the details are below if you are on YouTube. We'd appreciate if you hit like and subscribe, leave comments, tell your friends, share us around. We'd greatly appreciate that. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next week. Bye for now.